Hi, Stephen. It's really great to connect with you again. We met a long time ago when you were the co-founder of or founder of a Millennial Action Project. And now you've moved on to another exciting adventure, Bridge Entertainment Labs, I believe it's called. Could you tell me about your new venture and what your goals and mission are, and just a little about the background of Bridge Entertainment Labs?
Well, thank you, David, and thanks for having me on. Always a pleasure to talk with you and figure out how we save our democracy. As you mentioned, and as a lot of folks in the democracy field know, I spent a lot of the last 15 years founding and building the Millennial Action Project, now called Future Caucus, which is the nation's largest nonpartisan organization of young elected officials. The real mission being that we can bridge the divide with young legislators and build a new pipeline of leadership in our country. And that organization continues to thrive and has helped to pass many pioneering bills with bipartisan support at the congressional and state level, issues ranging from criminal justice reform to climate change and gun violence prevention. One thing I noticed during that work, as well as a major and interesting journey afterwards, which was running for the US Senate in my home state of Wisconsin, was that we have an urgent need to articulate a more compelling vision for bridge building in our country and to shift the culture, to tell some of the stories that you and I have found, David, on the ground, and give those some of the biggest cultural platforms possible. And so that was really some of the thoughts in mind when I decided to jump on board as the new president of Bridge Entertainment Labs. I would say the one line that was defining this shift in my mind is the idea that political change is downstream from culture change, and that media itself is a democracy issue. And so the big idea with Bridge Entertainment Labs, which is all about working in the world of entertainment and culture and storytelling, is to elevate this new idea, this ethos of bridge building in our country through TV, film, music, and other forms of entertainment media. And that's working directly with creatives, as well as both funding and generating new content as well. And we've launched, we did the public launch of the organization last fall through a conference called Creating New American Stories of Us. And the organization was incubating for about a couple of years before that. So very excited to be on this culture change journey. And it's carving out new ground, I would say, in our field.
Well, it's very exciting to me. I have a passion and a belief that the importance of pop culture, a culture in general, to get more and more citizens involved, because the movement that you are part of and helped start with Millennial Action Project needs more citizens involved. And a lot of them can first become involved if they get attracted to the powerful stories that various forms of entertainment can tell. Do you concentrate more on film, on dance, on music, or is it any type of entertainment that's most attractive to you in telling the stories?
Well, first, as you know, David, that I have a long-standing passion for music. I grew up playing in rock and jazz and other forms of bands growing up, and music was very much the inspiration to find a mission, find a calling to bridge some of the divides of our country. And I think jazz music in particular is just about the best metaphor I've found for a healthy, diverse democracy. Now, with Bridge Entertainment Labs, we've had an existing focus on film and TV, working directly with TV writers and producers, helping to fund and elevate new film projects as well. And those have been very exciting to work on. One example of a sitcom right now on ABC, where we collaborate with some of the writers, is called The Conners. And they have already brought some of these themes into their into this show, which has been a lot of fun to see and see that it actually increased ratings and as opposed to decreased ratings. But because of this passion I have for music, and music is such a pillar for the entertainment industry, we're partnering with a number of groups in our space to explore the role of engaging musicians to tell this new story of us in America. We also hear a lot about gaming, how gaming has a unique ability and a huge reach with young people right now. So we're open to all of those different mediums of entertainment. And I think one of the reasons why is that this medium of entertainment has probably more ability than any other form of content to reach people who are outside of the elite bubble of our country, to reach people who go about their daily lives and are trying to make sense of what's going on in our world. And that's what's really exciting to me.
Sure. Well, it's all very exciting, and I know from your history that you realize that change doesn't happen, and it's a long-term. Curious because I talked to a lot of people involved in the reform bridging movement. Has any of your strategy changed because we live in such divisive times, and we have what will undoubtedly be a very divisive election coming up in November? Does that change any of your focus at all, or are you still pretty consistent in moving along and trying to think of this as a long-term project?
We're consistent, and here's the reason why. If you look at what's happening at a high level with the 2024 election, we have likely two presidential candidates for which most of the country doesn't approve of. And with one of those presidential candidates, despite there being more and more indictments against him, his political power only increases. And so that should be at least one of many indicators here that the problem is much deeper. And we know that there will be a multi-billion-dollar effort invested on both partisan sides. For those of us in the bridge building and democracy movements, we have to be able to hold two things at once. One is doing the foundational work for us to have a healthy, diverse democracy and prevent authoritarians from getting elected in the first place, and conducting in our personal capacities work to ensure we get the best candidates elected. I think too often those two things are presented as mutually exclusive. And I think one way to just think about this, to know that we can hold both at the same time, is that when you get to election season, we absolutely should work as hard as we can to get the best people elected. But after election season, it's time for governing. It's time to bring together the leaders that have been elected to achieve the most amount of positive change possible, instead of what often happens, which is the governing season never happens. We skip over that step, and it's a perpetual campaign. So my big message here for everyone in our bridge building and democracy movement is to say, let's hold both at the same time, because we need to prevent the situation in the first place and get the best people elected possible.
Well, that's a great message. And I have another question about messaging. We certainly need, democracy is not a spectator sport. We need more citizens involved. Yet a lot of citizens think they cannot make a difference. So if someone was watching a TV show that you were involved with that had a powerful message of bridging, or went to a concert, what's the next step? How do they become involved? What can they do?
Well, the first step is just to do the internal work, to overcome the real fear that a lot of people have, to not just bridge a divide, but even associate with someone who is across a line of difference. And I'm not talking about someone you don't know at all. I'm talking about your own friend circles and your own families. When I give talks around the country, I always ask a question, which is, who here has had a challenge bridging a political divide in your own family or your own friend circle? Every single person raises their hand. So clearly this topic is on the minds of a lot of people. And so I think the first step is to see your own agency for change in your most immediate orbits of people. And I think inevitably what's going to happen through that process is you're going to build some degree of greater common understanding and perhaps rebuild some of the friendships and family ties that you have, which is a nice additional benefit. But then the next step, if you feel compelled, if you feel it in your heart to reach beyond just your immediate orbit of people, you can start a bridge building effort in your own community. There are many great local organizations working. There are dialogues happening all the time in our space. And then you could also look at some of the organizations, many of which I've been involved in and you've been involved in, to more directly build these movements. It could be, for example, helping to elevate narratives of bridge building in our country. And that's what our organization, Bridge Entertainment Labs, is all about. Or you could directly change the electoral system of our country and change the incentives of our elected officials to do better work. And so there's so many opportunities out there, but I think the first step is believing that change is possible and overcoming that fear in your own circles.
Well, that's wonderful. I'm always struck, Stephen, by your optimism and your upbeat attitude. And things are, since I've been involved in this healthy democracy movement, it seems to be going in the opposite direction. Is there something about your background, something as a child? Is there anything inherent about Stephen Olikara that allows you to keep going despite, what for many is a depressing, there's nothing I can do situation?
Well, David, it does go far back and into my background. I grew up in Wisconsin, and my parents are immigrants from India. And naturally, in the space in which I was growing up, there were not a lot of people who looked like me or shared my background. And there are a couple directions you can go in that environment. One is to further isolate yourself and become kind of more of an outcast, or just only associate with the very small number of people who share your background. And the other path is to build community. And for a while there, it could have gone either direction. And not surprisingly, a lot of the music I got into does have kind of an anti-establishment feel to it. I grew up playing in alternative rock and punk rock bands. But at the same time, I had people who were part of the mainstream culture in grade school who were willing to embrace my differences and connect me to the broader community. And music was a huge vehicle for doing that. Music was a huge opportunity to bridge the divides of greater Milwaukee, which is a highly segregated metro area. So seeing the power of what happens when communities of diverse people come together to achieve a larger calling or a larger cause, to me was an expression of American democracy at its best. So I've seen the best, I've seen the worst, I know it's possible. And I think that, being a first generation American is something that just instilled this degree of optimism and confidence about what America can be. And because of the work I've done over the last 15 years, I got the unique window into seeing the best of politics, which is very rare. I mean, usually in the media, you only see the worst and the most cynical parts of politics, but I've seen where young legislators came together across party lines to pass environmental legislation, or the first gun violence prevention bill in over a generation, and saw that a lot of these methods really do work. The last missing piece, the next frontier that I really see, is getting that ethos and the belief that it's possible into our culture.
Well, you're certainly one of the leaders of that next frontier. And I have to give you a special thanks, because I believe I found out this morning you're headed to Sundance, to the film festival.
That's right.
And you made a special effort to do this interview, and I'm very grateful for that. Could you tell us a little about what's going to happen in Sundance and how it relates to your vision and your work?
Absolutely. And it's absolutely my pleasure and honor to be here with you, David. And yes, we've got a very exciting weekend ahead at Sundance, and the engagements we've had have expanded, which is a good thing, but has also made today a little crazy schedule-wise. But I'm speaking on a couple of panels, and Sundance is the most prominent film festival, really, in our country. And it's a huge audience of creatives, of producers, directors, investors in films. One thing I've seen with the history of Sundance is sometimes stories that need to be told, that initially are sidelined or not taken seriously, get an audience at Sundance. They will do a screening, and key players in the industry will be there and experience the reaction, experience the emotional connection to the stories, and realize this needs a bigger platform. And they'll take it up and put it on a larger distribution platform. And so I've seen that kind of magic happen. I'm just excited to introduce the conversation about Bridge Entertainment Labs, about the power of bridging content to some of the top leaders in the industry. And it's going to be a lot of fun. I'll say very briefly, one of the panels is about the intersection of the environmental storytelling movement and bridge building. The point being, you got to bring the two together to reach beyond the choir. And then the second one is about how we choose which stories to tell and which stories to get a platform. How do we source those stories from the ground and then elevate those to the top media institutions? So both topics I'm very passionate about, and it's going to be a great weekend.
Well, thank you so much for your time. And I'd like to do this again in a year or less, because your organization just started, and I'm sure it's all about storytelling. And I'm imagining the next 6 months, 8 months, you're going to have some inspiring stories for the citizens that are watching CityBiz interviews. And I'd love to share those stories, have you share those stories with our audience in the coming months. So we'll do this again for sure.
Absolutely. I look forward to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you again for making the time. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.